Well, good morning again. I think the real question to ask this morning is, have you been watching the World Cup? Mixed answers. I'll take what I thought might be the minority position and say that I don't really find soccer to be all that exciting. I know I might have to sneak out the back to avoid the wrath of all the diehard soccer fans out there, but I tried watching, I think it was USA versus England a couple weeks ago, and I could only get through about 30 minutes of the game because very rarely does something exciting actually happen. You know what the final score was? 0-0. Actually, I had to find that out later because I just couldn't get through the whole thing. I thought I could get a little more excitement by watching my plant grow on my windowsill. Don't tell Pastor Sergio I'm saying all this because I know he's a huge soccer fan and I don't want to find myself without a job next week. If you're watching, Sergio, go Italy. I don't know if they're still in the running, actually, but I will say this. Those soccer players, when they're out there on the field, they are totally immersed in the game, aren't they? It's as though nothing else exists except the ball, the field, and the other players. Complete and total engrossment in the game. It's safe to say that they are completely present when they are playing the game of soccer. Are you present this morning? Because you can be present without being present, right? You can be sitting there on that pew, putting a nice imprint in the cushion, yet your mind could be miles away, or it could be years away as well. You ever talk to somebody who's looking down at their cell phone? It's like talking to a wall. And then they look up and they give you that blank stare and go, wait, what? They are not present. They are somewhere else. It's no easy task to be completely present. Sometimes you find that you can do it for a few moments. You really only know in hindsight. But then your mind once again begins to slip away to the worries of the world. I've noticed that there are two demographics of people who seem to have the ability to be a little more present, to experience the present moment a little bit better than the rest of us. Those who are very young and those who are very old. It's as though it takes 80 years to relearn what we've spent a lifetime forgetting, that the life we have is the life that exists right now, moment by moment. You ever see a small child play with bubbles or playing in the sandbox and building a sandcastle? Totally captivated by what is directly in front of them. I can still see the smile on my grandmother's face at family gatherings as she was sitting in her chair, just looking around, just cherishing that moment because she knew that those moments would not last forever. I believe that one of the many effects of the fall of man into sin is our inability to experience life the way we are meant to experience it, moment by moment. One of the reasons I believe this is because Jesus seems to indicate this in his Sermon on the Mount, which we will look at momentarily. But God made us as temporal beings. That means we are beings who experience time. We only possess the ability to experience the present moment. Yet our minds are always looking back with regret, or they're looking forward with fear. The French mathematician and Christian philosopher Blaise Pascal, in his book Pensées, which is this collection of incredibly insightful nuggets of wisdom, said, "Let each one examine his thoughts, and he will find them all occupied with the past and the future. We scarcely ever think of the present, and if we think of it, it is only to take light from it to arrange the future. The present is never our end, and so we never live, but only hope to live. And as we are always preparing to be happy, it is inevitable that we should never be so." We're always preparing to be happy, so it's inevitable that we would never actually be so. We are prisoners to our plans, we are prisoners to our worries, we are prisoners to our might-be's and to our could-have-beens, and so we never truly live the way we were meant to live. Our minds are everywhere except right here, wherever here happens to be at the moment. One of the greatest tragedies of life is that we will have missed out on so much, not because we weren't present, but because we weren't present. Today I'm going to talk about a universal problem. a problem that affects some of us more than it does others, but it nonetheless affects us all. And this is the problem of anxiety and worry. And more importantly, I want to look at the solution to the problem proposed by Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount. And what's amazing about the solution is really just how simple and beautiful it is. The neuroendocrinologist Robert Sapolsky said that for the vast majority of beasts on this planet, stress is about a short-term crisis after which it is over with or you are over with. Animals experience stress just as humans do. Dogs experience stress, so do cats, maybe a little bit less so because they just lounge around all day. But their stress is a little bit different than the way we experience it. Their stress serves as a protective mechanism to help the animal avoid danger. And once the danger is gone, the stress begins to dissipate. Animals are present creatures, and so their stress response serves to protect them against immediate dangers. In humans, though, stress is prolonged and it's chronic, and it often exists in the absence of immediate stressors. You can be stressed out on your day off, sitting on your sofa, watching Bob Ross painting videos on Netflix. And if you can be stressed out listening to the soothing voice of Bob Ross, then you can be stressed out with anything. Surveys show, sadly, and I know it's a little bit difficult to read, but they show that with every succeeding generation since the silent generation, those born between 1928 and 1948, stress levels are reported to be higher than their predecessors. Gen Z, which is that little blue line at the top there, those born between 1997 and 2010 report the highest levels of stress of all generations. Now, this should be a little bit concerning to us. Young people are struggling with anxiety more than ever before. I witnessed this firsthand when I went to Andrews University. I'm quite a bit older than all my fellow students there. They're all 18, 19, 20, 21. I went back to college in my 30s. So it was interesting to hear them always talking about stress. If you were to ask them what their stress levels were, most of them will always say very high. I recall one student saying that if she gets an email, she would get stressed out about it. That's it, just getting an email. And it's not just college students either. Teenagers in high school report to have higher stress levels and anxiety than ever before. There's nothing more really to worry about in today's world than before, but there's still a lot more worrying going on. Now, you may rightly ask, are all forms of stress really negative, though? Couldn't we think of a couple examples where stress is maybe something that should occur? Say your child doesn't come home from school one day. Isn't stress justified? Or if your spouse is currently experiencing unusual sickness or unusual depression, wouldn't it show a lack of care not to worry? And I think in both examples, the answer is clearly yes. But most of the things we stress over and worry about do not concern present troubles. Most of our worries emerge from an anticipation of potential troubles that have yet to arrive in our lives. Worry almost always looks ahead. And that's why Jesus said those often quoted but very seldom heeded words in his Sermon on the Mount. He said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." Now, if we were to take this command out of context, as I just did, then it would be a rather silly command to make and an impossible command to keep. Can you stop worrying simply because somebody comes around and tells you not to? It'd be like telling the alcoholic, hey, just stop drinking. There's a reason why the alcoholic drinks and the reason why he is unable to stop. It is not in his immediate control to stop drinking, and it's not in our immediate control to simply stop worrying. But I ever so slightly misquoted the passage for you, and I did that on purpose. My apologies. The verse actually starts with a very significant word, and it starts with this word: "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." That word really changes everything. Jesus is not making a vacuous command, but rather he's making an argument from a set of premises to which this statement is the conclusion. He's making an argument from a set of premises to which this statement is the conclusion. Jesus gave a reason why we should not worry. He didn't just command it. He didn't just say it. He provided us with a worldview that, if embraced, should leave very little room for worry and anxiety. So the question then is, well, what is that worldview that he proposed? Let's back up a few verses and look what else he had to say earlier on in his Sermon on the Mount. He said, look at the birds of the air. Now, if you were living in the Tri-Cities, you'd probably say, look at the seagulls of the Walmart parking lot, which, when I first moved here, I thought was really strange, by the way. It's the desert, there are seagulls, but they're here somehow. Look at the seagulls of the Walmart parking lot. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Birds, well, let's go with seagulls. Seagulls do not approach the cares of life in the same way that humans do. They approach every day afresh. What they catch that day, which for seagulls I suppose would be like a bag of chips in somebody's tailgate, they eat that day. They're not thinking about tomorrow. They're not thinking about their plans for the future. They're not thinking about their worries for the future. They're thinking about today. That's all they really can think about. I'm not sure how many thoughts actually go through the mind of a seagull anyways. Yet they have enough. Last time I went to the Walmart parking lot, the seagulls were flourishing there. How much more will God provide for those who are made in his image? He certainly provides for those through the many and diverse ways in nature to provide for those who are not made in his image. How much more is he willing to provide for those who are made in his image? Your heavenly Father is aware of and he's involved in every single one of your needs. Notice, though, it's not planning. It's not thinking ahead that Jesus is prohibiting here. It's good to plan. It's good to think ahead. I'm thankful for the children's story that Melissa just told. We should be excited about the future, as she said. But we can plan ahead without worrying about our plans that lie ahead. We can think ahead without worrying about the events that lie ahead. So what precisely is the worldview, then, that Jesus is proposing? What is his reason for not worrying? There's really a simple reason here. You have a heavenly Father. You have a heavenly Father. This single truth should fundamentally change the way that we look at the events that surround our lives. We're not consigned to this chaotic, hostile world to live on our, or to merely survive on our own. It's not a dog-eat-dog world. It's not survival of the fittest. It's not every man for himself. We have the fatherly care of the sovereign God of the universe who has our back. Now, there are two essential attributes, I think, to take into consideration here about God. Two essential attributes. One of them is his omnipotence. The other one is his perfect goodness. When you join these two attributes into a single person, then you arrive at a being who is not only perfectly able to care for you, but he's also perfectly willing to do so. Say you just had one of these. Say God was one but not the other. If God was omnipotent, we know what omnipotence means. It means to be all-powerful, right? If God was all-powerful, but he lacked perfect goodness, then he would be able to perfectly care for you, but he may not be willing to do so. Or, if he had perfect goodness, but was not all-powerful, then he'd be willing to do so. He'd be interested in caring for you, but he may not have the power to do so. But if God is all-powerful and he's all good, then not only is he able to perfectly care for you, but he is also willing to do so. This is the God of the Bible. This is the God who Jesus describes. This is the God in whom our life resides. The question, though, is not whether we believe this about God. I think most of us here probably do believe this about God. We've grown up with this belief about God. The question is not whether we believe that this is true about God, but whether we live as though this belief is true. You may have heard of Charles Blondin. He's French, so it's probably not pronounced that way. Jen told me how to pronounce it correctly, but I'm not even going to try. We'll call him Charles Blondin, American pronunciation. He's famous for being a tightrope walker who would do these incredible feats. He would push a wheelbarrow blindfolded across Niagara Falls. One of the most incredible tightropers of all time. And one time he wanted a little bit of crowd participation. So he asked the audience, who here believes that I could put a person in the wheelbarrow and push him across Niagara Falls? And of course, everybody raises their hand. Yes, we believe, we believe. And then, of course, you know the question that he asks next, right? Who's going to get in? To that question, not a single person raised their hand. They believed he could do it, but they did not live as though that belief were true. One author calls this type of belief about God functional atheism. Functional atheism. You may not be an atheist. That is someone who believes that God does not exist. But you have to ask yourself whether you live day to day as though atheism is true. What are your thought patterns like? Are your thought patterns in such a way that God does not exist, that he's not omnipotent, that he's not perfectly good? It should drastically affect the way we live and the way we think about the future and about everything, really. Because if God is who Jesus revealed him to be, then why are our minds so full of worry? Why are they so full of worry? What is the actual reason? In fact, Jesus practically even asked rhetorically. He said, which of you by worrying can add a single life to your lifespan? Or a single hour, to your lifespan? What is worrying going to actually achieve practically? I mean, if anything, it's going to remove a couple hours from your lifespan, and I think it will give you a couple premature white hairs along the way. And then in verse 33, he makes that very famous statement, a statement where it should serve as the foundation of every life, every family, and every society. He says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. What are those things that he's talking about here? Well, if we were to go back and read a couple verses before, these are the necessities of everyday life. All the things that you need, your shelter, your clothing, your food. And not just your necessities to merely survive, but your necessities to have an abundant life. We don't get all those things by seeking them, but we get all those things by seeking something far more important, God's kingdom and his righteousness. What is God's kingdom and his righteousness? What does it mean to seek God's kingdom and his righteousness? Very simply, it means to seek to do the will of God before all else. Ally yourself totally and completely with God's purpose. If you do this, you'll find that not only will all your needs be provided, but your anxiety and your worry will just simply dissipate. And then and only then, after all of that, finally does he say, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So Jesus is not vacuously saying, don't worry about it. He understands that we can't simply conjure psychological states in our mind. He knows that we cannot directly determine our emotions just by trying. But we can learn to see the world in such a way that our psychology and our emotions begin to change slowly in due time with practice. Tomorrow, Jesus says, will worry about itself. It's easy to fail to appreciate just how wise this saying is. Why do we fret over trouble that has yet to even arrive in our life? Do you eat now because you're going to be hungry tomorrow? Unless you know you're not going to get any food. Do you open your umbrella now because it is predicted to rain next week? Instead, worry about those things that are directly in front of you, not what may or may not be in front of you tomorrow. God will give you what you need, but he'll give it to you when you need it. Just as he gave to the Israelites manna from heaven, not a week in advance, not even a day in advance, unless it was Friday for the Sabbath. You know when he gave it to them? That day they had to go out and get it. He provides for them when they need it. And God's grace is bestowed daily for the day's needs. And his grace is always sufficient to get us through. Let's explore a little further how irrational it actually is to worry about tomorrow. And we'll do it with a little bit of philosophical reflection here. Time is a very mysterious part of reality that is, quite frankly, very difficult to comprehend. Have you ever tried to define time, the concept of time? What is time? I'm not asking what is the time. I'm asking what is time? Take a moment yourself and try to define the concept of time. Just think through your head. How would you do that? It's very, very challenging. Augustine, the 4th century theologian, said that what then is time? If no one asks me, I know what it is. If I wish to explain to him who asks, I do not know. It's one of those things where you kind of just know what it is, but it's very difficult to put into words. One philosopher said that time is that which keeps everything from happening all at once. And that's about as good of a definition as any. Time is that which keeps everything from happening all at once. God made us to be creatures who live within the bounds of space and time. We are temporal creatures. It's how we relate to each other. It's how we go about our day-to-day lives. It's how we even relate to God. We do not experience the future, and we do not experience the past, except for the way in which we remember it. We only experience the present moment. So we must ask then, what exactly is the thing that we are worrying about when we are worrying about the future? What actually is it that is causing us fear and anxiety and worry? Imagine there was a ship captain who was deathly afraid of the horizon. Deathly afraid of the horizon. You know, he takes out his telescope, he looks into the distance, he sees the horizon, anxiety and worry fills his mind. Now, apart from obviously choosing the wrong career path here, what is our ship captain failing to recognize? What is he failing to grasp? The horizon, it's not an actual concrete object, is it? It's an abstraction. The closer you get to it, the further it gets from you. Once you get to where the horizon was, well, it's no longer the horizon anymore, is it? Our ship captain is fearing nothing except his own imagination and his own thoughts. He's really fearing nothing at all. He's fearing no thing. The horizon is a fitting illustration of the future. The future doesn't exist either. As you get close to it, it gets further from you. Once tomorrow arrives, well, it's no longer tomorrow, is it? Now it has become today. The future will forever remain a distant horizon, nothing more than a concept in our mind. Now, we have a name for irrational fears. You know what they're called? Phobias. Does anybody have a phobia of this? I can see people cringing actually out there. Arachnophobia, they called it. They even made a movie called Arachnophobia back in the 1990s, and I saw it as a kid, and I dreamt of spiders for weeks. So don't ever see that movie if you have a fear of spiders. But I kind of have arachnophobia, as I think most people actually do. There are a few people who are just love holding them in their hand, and it's totally weird. But I have no rational explanation for why I am scared of spiders, except for I just think they're nasty. There's no other good reason. You ever see one in the corner of your room, and then you look back 2 minutes later and it's gone? And then you're like, oh, well, now we have to burn the whole house down. I just don't like spiders. I don't want them near me. I think they're amazing creatures, you know, but I just don't want them near me, and I especially don't want them on me. You know, it's kind of this freak out thing that happens. Arms will be flailing. Now, I wish they all looked like this. Isn't that a cute spider? No, some people say. It's weird to put cute and spider in the same sentence, but I kind of think that's a cute spider. I wish they all looked like that, but unfortunately they don't. We actually have one on our back porch. Well, we did in the summertime. It looked a little bit like this. It was this cute little spider, and Jen named him Maurice. But most spiders don't look like this. They look like that, except maybe a little bit smaller, thankfully. But here's the thing about spiders. There are 43,000 species of spider, and only 30 of them are venomous. That's 0.069%. And most of them that are venomous are completely harmless to humans. The odds of being injured by a spider are next to nothing. You have greater odds of being injured by a chihuahua. Yet we don't really fear chihuahuas. There are other phobias as well. There is, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, ophidiophobia, which is the fear of snakes. Most snakes are harmless. There's aerophobia, the fear of flying. The odds of dying in a plane crash are 1 in 11 million. That's 0.00000% chance of dying in a plane crash. Ablutophobia, the fear of bathing. I'm very happy I don't have this, and I think Jen's probably even happier than I am that I don't have this. I wouldn't be married if I had it. There's glossophobia, the fear of public speaking. In a survey I once saw, more people were afraid of public speaking than they were of death itself. Jerry Seinfeld once said that people would rather be in the coffin than giving a eulogy at the funeral. Each of these is an irrational fear because the object that is feared poses no or very little threat. But notice still, each one of these objects still exists. Spiders exist, snakes exist, bathing exists, airplanes exist. To worry about the future is even worse because the future does not even exist. It poses less of a threat than spiders. It's more, if anything, like a fear of the boogeyman under your bed. In fact, that probably would have been a good sermon title, Boogeyman for Grown-ups. Worry of events that have yet to even take place is a fear not of present realities, but really just of possibilities. It's a fear of nothing but our own imagination. And imagination, unfortunately, has the power over reason. The only thing that is actually real is this present moment right now. And let me ask you this. How is the present moment right now? How are you right now? You may be like, oh, well, right now work is not going so well. But you're not working right now. How are you now? This is a question we should always be asking ourselves. Whenever we feel our minds going to the troubles of tomorrow, just ask yourself, yeah, but how am I right now? And unless you're currently going through some tragedy, or if you're sitting on a dentist chair getting a root canal, then 9 times out of 10, I bet it's going to be pretty good. I bet it's going to be pretty good. But our worry of tomorrow prevents us from enjoying the blessings of today. When I was at Andrews University, I liked to do a lot of extracurricular reading. And Jen picked up this book for me at a bookstore sale. This is one of those books where, it's a little book, one of those books that changes your life. You know, we all kind of have like those top 10 books on our bookshelves that just changed your life. To me, this was one. It's called The Practice of the Presence of God. Now, this is not some like new agey book about just being in tune with the universe or anything like that. It was actually written by a 17th century monk named Brother Lawrence. He spent his life in a Parisian community working in the kitchen as a cook and repairing sandals for the community. Brother Lawrence, this humble man, became quite famous for achieving what most people never are able to achieve in life. Truly experiencing the presence of God at every moment in life. And this is his testimony. This is his instruction to the world through a correspondence of letters. He spent years disciplining his heart and his mind to yield to God's presence. And he said this, "As often as I could, I placed myself as a worshiper before him, fixing my mind upon his holy presence, recalling it when I found it wandering from him. This proved to be an exercise frequently painful, yet I persisted through all difficulties." It's not something that's easy to accomplish. It takes a lot of discipline to do, yet Brother Lawrence, more than many people in this world, was able to do it. What we consider to be mundane and repetitive, routine activities were for Brother Lawrence avenues for experiencing the incredible love and presence of God. He immersed himself into the mind of God, regardless of what was going on, regardless of where he was or what he was doing. He cooked meals with God. He ran errands with God. He scrubbed pots with God. He endured the scorn of the world with God. He said that when he would finish work and then he would retire to his home to enter into worship and personal devotion, that for him, he was not entering into a new phase of activity. He was continuing doing what he had been doing all day. He didn't compartmentalize his spiritual life the way we tend to do today, where we have our spiritual life, and we have our work life, we have our family life, and then we have our leisure life and our vacation life. To Brother Lawrence, it was all spiritual life. And he said, "There is not in the world a kind of life more sweet and delightful than that of a continual conversation with God. Only those who practice and experience it can comprehend it." Something that's very difficult to describe, something I certainly couldn't say. Still working on it myself. But only you can only taste and see that the Lord is good. So for Brother Lawrence, he was able to turn even the most commonplace and menial of tasks into a hymn to the glory of God. Now, the presupposition behind Brother Lawrence's work is that God is present now, at this very moment. You are currently immersed in the love and the presence of God as though it were just you and him. No matter what are you doing, no matter what you are doing, no matter where you are, God's with you as though it were just you and him. As we begin to close, and I can go ahead and call the worship team to come up, as we begin to close, you may have noticed that a key word has been strangely absent from this sermon, even though the sermon to a large degree is about that one word. The word is faith. In modern pop theology, the opposite of faith is often characterized as doubt. If you have a lot of faith, then you will not be doubting. If you're doubting a lot, well, then you just don't have a lot of faith. But that is a mischaracterization. The opposite of certainty is doubt, and we are never commanded in the Bible to have absolute certainty. The opposite of faith is not doubt, but worry and fear. Often you see these juxtaposed in Scripture. Jesus will say, why are you fearing? Are you of little faith? Faith and fear are mutually exclusive in the Bible. The more you have of one, the less you will have of the other, because one displaces the other. So when Jesus says that if you seek God's kingdom first, all these things will be provided for you, do you believe that? When Jesus says that God cares more for you than the lilies of the field or the birds of the air, do you believe that? When it is said that all things work for good for those who believe and love God, do you believe that? And are you ready to live as though those beliefs are true? There's a saying we often hear, live as though every day is your last. And it's a bit cliche, isn't it? But I still think that there is a powerful truth behind this saying. If you lived as though every day were your last, what would it look like? If you lived as though today were your last day, how would it be different than every other day? You would probably make plans. You would get your affairs in order, but those plans wouldn't be for you any longer. They would be for others. You certainly wouldn't worry about tomorrow. You're not going to be here for tomorrow. Those concerns wouldn't trouble you anymore. You would likely spend that time cherishing those final hours with your family, with your loved ones. You would likely enter deep into prayer in a way that you have never prayed before. If you knew it was going to be your last day, then I can almost guarantee that on that day at least, you would be present like you've never been present before. So I have a challenge for you. It's an assignment, if you will. I think you'll like it, though. This next week, find a free hour. Maybe I should restate that. Make a free hour, because you probably won't just find one laying around. Make a free hour, and in that free hour, just be present. Maybe it's on your sofa, maybe it's in your den, in your living room. Maybe you prefer to take a walk in the woods, if you're warm. Leave your phone in the other room, put on some light music, grab a cup of tea, whatever it is that makes you comfortable. And for that 1 hour, be present. Immerse yourself in the present moment, and more importantly, immerse yourself in the presence of God. Think about Jesus and all he's done. Think about him in your life. Think about all those that you love and who love you. Think about the incredible life that God has given to you. And think about how silly it is to worry about things that are just probably going to happen anyways. Think about that moment that you are currently experiencing and how it is radically unique, so unique that that moment will never repeat itself, not even in eternity. It is a gift from God to you. Cherish that gift. I'll close with this poem by my favorite gospel poet, Annie Johnson Flint. She said, "One day at a time, but the day is so long, and the heart is not brave, and the soul is not strong. O thou Christ, be near all the way, give courage and patience and strength for the day. Swift comes his answer, so clear and so sweet. Yea, I will be with thee, thy troubles to meet. I will not forget thee, nor fail thee, nor grieve. I will not forsake thee, I will never leave. Not yesterday's load we are called on to bear, nor tomorrow's uncertain and shadowy care. Why should we look forward or back with dismay? Our needs, as our mercies, are but for the day. One day at a time, and the day is his day. He hath numbered its hours, though they haste or delay. His grace is sufficient, we walk not alone. As the day, so the strength that he giveth his own."